The slap landed before anyone could blink. It echoed off the marble floors of the grand celestial ballroom, sharp and clean, the kind of sound that cuts through music and laughter and the clinking of champagne flutes. 230 guests went silent. Heads turned. Mouths fell open. And Liu Chen stood there, his cheek burning, his mop still in his hand, in a gray janitor's uniform that had seen better days, staring at the woman who had once told him he was her entire world. Zhao Liyun's hand was still raised. Her eyes were cold. Colder than he remembered. Cold in the way that only comes when someone has made up their mind so thoroughly that even mercy feels inconvenient. "You have some nerve," she said, her voice low but perfectly audible in the suffocating silence. "Coming anywhere near my wedding. Near me. Near any of this." I wasn't trying to," Liu Chen started, but she cut him off with a look. The kind of look that says, "Don't embarrass yourself further. I don't want to hear it." She stepped closer, her white gown trailing behind her like a statement. "You were never worthy of me, Liu Chen. Not when we were together. Not now. Not ever. The fact that you're here," she gestured at his uniform with something between disgust and pity, "cleaning my floors, on my wedding day, just proves every single thing I ever thought about you." Laughter broke out. Not all of it. But enough. The kind of laughter that fills a room like smoke, slow and suffocating. Security guards materialized from somewhere. 2 of them. Big-shouldered men in black suits who grabbed Liu Chen by the arms without a word and began hauling him toward the service exit. His mop clattered to the floor. Nobody picked it up. "Get him out of here," Zhao Liyun said, already turning back toward her guests, already smiling again, already forgetting. Liu Chen didn't struggle. He let them drag him. Because the alternative, fighting, shouting, making a scene, felt like giving her exactly what she wanted. Proof. Proof that he was exactly what she said he was. Unworthy. Small. Forgettable. The service door slammed shut behind him. Outside, the night air was cold. He stood in the alley behind the hotel, surrounded by the smell of cigarette smoke and kitchen grease, his cheeks still burning, his hands still trembling, not from fear, but from something quieter and more dangerous. The kind of feeling that lives beneath anger. Below humiliation. The feeling of watching something end that you already knew was over. He pressed his back against the wall and closed his eyes. He thought about the last 2 years. The early mornings. The double shifts. The way he had smiled at customers who talked through him like he wasn't there. He thought about the specific day Zhao Liyun had looked at him, really looked at him, and said, "You know what your problem is? You have no ambition." He had laughed it off. He had told himself she was just stressed. He had told himself a lot of things. He breathed out slowly. Then he took out his phone and dialed a number. It rang once. "Phase 1, he said quietly. "Begin tonight." He put the phone back in his pocket, straightened his uniform, and walked away from the grand celestial ballroom without looking back. 2 blocks away, a black car with tinted windows was already waiting for him. 48 hours earlier, Liu Chen had been scrubbing a coffee stain off the third-floor lobby tiles of Donghua Plaza when the man in the expensive suit had walked past him, walked through him, really, the way people do when they've decided someone doesn't occupy the same social plane as them. "Missed a spot," the man said, not breaking stride. Liu Chen didn't look up. He moved his mop 3 inches to the left. This was his life now. Or rather, this was the life he had chosen to live, deliberately, precisely, for reasons that would have sounded insane to anyone who didn't know the full picture. And nobody knew the full picture. That was the point. He had taken the janitor job 8 months ago. Donghua Plaza. Ground floor, 3rd floor, lobby cleaning, occasional spills in the food court. He showed up every day at 6 in the morning, signed in under a name that wasn't quite his, and worked 8 hours without complaint. His supervisor called him the quiet one. A coworker named Brother Wei called him reliable. Neither of them knew anything about him beyond what they could see. It was somewhere near 11 in the morning when Mei Xinyue appeared around the corner of the corridor, carrying 2 coffees in a cardboard sleeve. She worked in the design firm on the 4th floor, something in branding, he thought, though they had never discussed specifics. They had developed the kind of quiet, consistent friendship that exists between people who share a building but not a world, brief exchanges, small kindnesses, an unspoken acknowledgement that they saw each other even when the rest of the building did not. "Double shot," she said, holding one cup toward him. "You look like you need it more than I do." He looked up. "I'm fine." "You always say that." She set the cup down on the edge of the cleaning cart anyway. She had a way of doing things, gentle but certain, like she'd already decided what was good for you and was just waiting for you to catch up. "Someone was rude to you again, wasn't it?" He said nothing, which was answer enough. "You know what I think," she said. "I think there are people in this world who measure worth by what they can see. The uniform. The mop. The title on the door." She leaned against the wall, cradling her own coffee. "They're not wrong that those things exist. They're just wrong about what they mean." He looked at her. "Not everyone sees your worth," she said simply. "But that doesn't mean it isn't there." He picked up the coffee. "Thank you," he said, and meant it in more ways than she knew. She smiled and walked away, and Liu Chen watched her go for a moment before turning back to his work. Something shifted, barely perceptibly, in his chest. Not hope, exactly. Not yet. Something more like recognition. He had met Zhao Liyan 3 years ago at a mutual friend's dinner party, before the janitor job, before any of it. Back then he had been a different version of himself, or rather, a less complete version. He had been between things. Between lives. Between the person he had been and the person he was becoming. She had found that attractive. Briefly, in the way that some people find ambiguity attractive until it stops feeling like mystery and starts feeling like inconvenience. They had dated for 11 months. He had been careful. Careful about what he told her, careful about what he showed her, careful in the way that a man who has learned the hard way to keep his real self below the surface stays careful. She had interpreted his privacy as evasiveness. His reserve as lack of ambition. His silence as having nothing to say. "I just don't understand what you want," she had told him once, 3 months before the end. They had been sitting in her apartment, the city lights bleeding through the window. "Like, what is your plan, Liu Chen? What is the actual plan?" "I have a plan," he had said. "You have a direction." "That's not the same thing." She had looked at him with something that might have been concern if it hadn't been so clearly edged with impatience. "I need someone who can stand next to me and, I don't know. Show up. Actually show up, in a way that people can see." "I show up for you," he had said quietly. "That's not," she had stopped. "Never mind." The breakup itself had come 6 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon, swift and deliberate. She had sat him down on the same couch and said, her voice measured, almost clinical, "I met someone. Wen Jiahao. He has structure, Liu Chen. He has a company, a family, a clear trajectory. He knows where he's going." A pause. "I think I need someone who knows where they're going." "You're choosing him," Liu Chen had said. "Not a question." "I'm choosing what makes sense," she had answered. "I'm sorry. I really am." "But you were," she had stopped again, and in the stopping, left the sentence hanging with everything it contained. "You were a burden. You were uncertain. You were never going to be enough." He had stood up. He had thanked her, quietly, for her honesty. He had left without slamming the door. 2 days later, he had taken the janitor job. If you enjoyed the story so far and want to know what happens when Liu Chen's real identity is finally revealed, subscribe now and hit the bell. We're just getting started. That night, the night of the wedding, the night he left Zhao Liyan's slap still burning on his cheek, Liu Chen's car moved through the city in silence. The driver said nothing. The city outside the windows looked the same as it always did, indifferent and bright. But something in the interior of the car felt different. Heavier. More real. 20 minutes later, the car turned off the main road and descended into an underground structure that didn't appear on any public map. The elevator was glass and steel. The floors below the city existed in a different register entirely, cleaner, more precise, lit with the kind of controlled light that exists in places where nothing is accidental. The doors opened. The corridor stretched ahead of him, clean and white and silent. 3 guards at the entrance saw him coming and dropped to one knee simultaneously, without a word, without instruction, a movement so practiced it had become instinct. "Sir," said the closest one. Liu Chen walked past them without slowing. In the changing room at the end of the hall, he removed the gray janitor's uniform, carefully, almost gently, like a man removing something he respected even if the world didn't, and dressed in what was waiting for him. Black suit. White shirt. No tie. The kind of clothes that don't announce themselves because they don't have to. He stepped into the operations room. The wall of screens was the first thing anyone noticed in this room. Floor to ceiling. 16 panels, each carrying a different feed, financial data, satellite imagery, encrypted communications, market charts, names and figures and numbers that moved like living things. At the central desk, a woman named Director Lin looked up from her console, saw him, and stood immediately. "Shadow Emperor," she said, and her voice carried the particular quality of someone speaking not out of ceremony but out of something more genuine. Earned reverence. Behind her, 12 analysts in identical black clothing stood at their stations. None of them spoke. Liu Chen moved to the head of the table, looked at the screens for a moment, then sat. "Report," he said. "Phase 1 assets are positioned," Director Lin said, pulling up a global map on the main screen. Red markers blinked across 4 continents. The One Group's Eastern financing is fully exposed. Their 3 largest institutional backers have received new information about the family's liabilities. 2 have already initiated withdrawal proceedings. The 3rd is expected to follow by morning. The stepbrothers' accounts. Frozen as of an hour ago. All 3 holding entities. Liu Chen nodded once. The property holdings. Being transferred out of reach. By the time anyone files for recovery, there will be nothing to recover. A pause. "And the wedding?" he asked, and his voice was completely level, the way the voice of someone becomes completely level when they have decided not to let a thing have power over them. Director Lin hesitated for exactly half a second. "Proceeding," she said. "For now." "Good," he said. He turned back to the screens. Somewhere on one of them, lines of financial data were shifting in real time, a cascade of quiet destruction, elegant and invisible, unfolding across 3 time zones. The eclipse order moved the way deep water moves, with the kind of force that is only visible once it has already reshaped the shoreline. Liu Chen looked at the map and thought about a woman in a white gown who had never once wondered what he was capable of. He thought about the word burden. He thought about the specific weight of being told you are not enough by someone who never bothered to find out what you were. "Initiate phase 2 at dawn," he said. "Yes, sir." He sat alone in the glow of the screens for a long time after everyone else had stepped back to their stations. Not out of anger. Not out of revenge, exactly. Out of something more patient than either of those things. Something that had been waiting for exactly the right moment to stop being invisible. The morning after the wedding, the One Group began to fall apart. It started with the kind of thing that seems small until it isn't. A phone call that went unanswered. A wire transfer that returned with a cryptic error code. A business associate who had been completely reliable for 7 years who sent a 2-line message saying, simply, that he would be unable to continue the current arrangement. By 10 in the morning, when Jiahao, Liu Chen's former stepbrother by circumstance, the man Zhao Liyun had chosen, the man with structure and trajectory and a clear direction, was sitting in his office on the 32nd floor of the One Group Tower, staring at his phone like a man who is starting to understand that the ground beneath him is not solid. "Get me Zhang Weiming," he told his assistant. Zhang Weiming didn't answer. "Get me the Huanpu Capital office." Huanpu Capital had already sent a letter. Their legal team. Formal language. Withdrawal of interest. Effective immediately. "What is happening?" When Jiahao said, to no one in particular, in the voice of a man who had spent 34 years believing that enough money and enough connections made a person untouchable. His father, Wen Renlong, arrived at 11. The older man was the kind of person who had built something real once, a manufacturing concern, modest but sturdy, and had spent the subsequent decades trying to leverage it into something larger, which had led him into arrangements that were not always clean. He sat down across from his son and folded his hands on the desk with the practiced calm of someone who was deeply not calm. "Tell me what you know," the father said. "Everything is collapsing," Jiahao said. Every deal we have in motion. Every partnership. 3 of our financiers pulled out overnight. Our accounts in the second holding company are, he stopped. They're frozen, father. I don't know how. I don't know who. Someone is coordinating this, his father said. Obviously someone is coordinating this. Who has this kind of reach? Jiahao looked out the window at the city. He had a very short list in his head, a list of people powerful enough to move this kind of weight, quickly, without announcing themselves. He went through the list once, twice. His jaw tightened. Pull every contact we have, he said finally. Every favor owed. I want a name. I want to know who is behind this. It took his intelligence contact until 3 in the afternoon. A former government official who still moved in the kinds of circles where information was currency. He called Jiahao on a private line and spoke without greeting. You're in the path of the eclipse order, the man said. There was something in his voice that Jiahao had never heard there before. Something that sounded like reluctance, as if this were information he would rather not be the one to deliver. Jiahao went still. The eclipse order, he repeated. The Shadow Emperor is behind this. All of it. I don't know what you did to attract his attention, but, a pause. Walk away, Jiahao. Whatever it is, walk away from it. The call ended. Jiahao sat in his office for a long time. The eclipse order was not something you discussed in public. It was not something you claimed to fully understand. It existed in the way that certain forces exist, not as a headline but as a current underneath everything, felt in the way markets moved, in the way deals collapsed or succeeded without visible reason, in the way powerful people sometimes became very quiet overnight. He thought about Liu Chen. He thought about the janitor's uniform. The mop. The humiliation at the wedding. The way everyone had laughed. He thought, no. It can't be. It isn't possible. But the certainty that followed the denial was cold and specific and very, very uncomfortable. We don't fight this, he told his father, when the older man came back to his office that evening. We can't fight something we can't see. Then what? Jiahao looked at his hands. We request a meeting, he said quietly. We stop running and we ask for a meeting. His father stared at him. You want to walk into a meeting with? I want to stop the bleeding, Jiahao said sharply. I want to know if there's anything left to save. Because right now, every hour we don't move, we lose more. He stood up. Pull every string we have left. I don't care what it costs. Get us in front of the Shadow Emperor. If you're hooked on this story, and I think you are, subscribe now. The confrontation is coming, and you don't want to miss a single word. On the 3rd day, they caught up to the wedding. Timeline and consequence arrived at the same point simultaneously, the way they always do when someone has engineered it that way. The ceremony at the Grand Celestial Ballroom was less festive than it had been 2 days prior. The initial joy of the wedding had been diluted by a kind of spreading unease that Zhao Liyan could feel even if she couldn't name it, the way Jiahao kept stepping away to check his phone, the way his father's smile had gotten fixed and rigid, the way conversation stopped when she entered rooms. She had told herself it was nerves. She had told herself it was nothing. The cars arrived at 2 in the afternoon. 5 of them. Black, identical, moving in convoy formation with the slow precision of a group that has never needed to hurry because hurrying implies uncertainty. They pulled up to the hotel entrance and stopped in a line, and for a long moment, nothing happened. Then the lead car's door opened. A man in a black suit stepped out. Behind him, 4 more. They walked through the entrance of the Grand Celestial Ballroom without pausing at the guest list, without asking for direction, without anything other than the absolute assurance of people who have been sent by someone who does not ask permission. The lead man found the wedding coordinator. The Shadow Emperor requests the presence of Wen Jiahao and his family, he said. Immediately. The coordinator stared at him. I'm sorry, who? Immediately, the man repeated. The ballroom went the same kind of quiet it had gone 2 days earlier when Liu Chen was dragged out, that specific, loaded silence that falls when everyone in a room understands simultaneously that something real is happening and they are in the middle of it. Zhao Liyan found Jiahao near the head table. He had already gone pale. His father was beside him, and both of them were looking at the men in black suits with the expression of people who have been dreading exactly this moment. "What is this?" she said. "Jiahao, what is happening? Who are these people?" He stopped. Started again. "We need to go with them." "What do you mean we need to go with them?" "It's our wedding. It's our Liu." His voice was quiet and very flat, the kind of flat that means there is nothing underneath it because everything underneath it has already collapsed. "We need to go." She looked at him. She looked at the men in the suits. She looked at the faces of the guests around her, who were all doing the thing that people do at moments like this, looking away, looking down, becoming very interested in the floor. Something cold moved through her that she could not have named. She followed. The headquarters of the Eclipse Order's surface operations was a building that announced itself through restraint. No logo on the exterior. No unnecessary ornamentation. 32 floors of clean steel and glass in the financial district, the kind of building that exists at the center of its block like a gravitational point, drawing everything else subtly toward it. They were taken to the 41st floor, a level that did not appear on the public directory, and led through a corridor of polished stone and muted light into a boardroom that felt like the inside of a held breath. The table was long and dark and very quiet. Around it, 12 people sat in identical stillness, watching the door. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The air in the room had a particular quality, compressed, deliberate, like the moment before a verdict. When Jiahao and his father sat in the chairs they were shown. Zhao Liyan sat beside them, her white wedding gown suddenly feeling absurd in this context, like a costume she had accidentally worn to the wrong event. They waited. The door at the far end of the room opened slowly. Liu Chen walked in. He was wearing black. He moved without hurry, without performance, with the particular ease of someone who has long since stopped needing to prove anything to any room he enters. His face was calm. His eyes were the same eyes that had been looking up from a mop 2 days ago, the same eyes that had met Zhao Liyan's across countless ordinary moments over 11 months together, but they carried now something she had never seen in them before. Not anger. Not triumph. Certainty. He walked to the head of the table and sat down. Zhao Liyan's face had gone white. Her mouth opened and closed once without producing sound. Beside her, Jiahao had placed both hands flat on the table, the gesture of a man trying to hold himself together through physical contact with something solid. You're. Zhao Liyan started. Liu Chen looked at her and said nothing. "You're the Shadow Emperor," Jiahao said. His voice came out quieter than he intended. You're him. You're actually him. "I've been called that," Liu Chen said. His tone was conversational. Unhurried. "You wanted a meeting. You've been pulling strings for 3 days trying to get one." He glanced around the table. "Here we are." Jiahao looked at his father. His father looked at his hands. Neither of them spoke for a moment that stretched and stretched. "I want to," Jiahao started. Stopped. Tried again. "I want to apologize. For whatever gave offense. If there was a misunderstanding, if something we did crossed a line, we're willing to make it right. Whatever that looks like." "A misunderstanding," Liu Chen repeated. "I know how that sounds," Jiahao said quickly. "I know. But I need you to understand that I never intended, I wasn't trying to," he exhaled. "We can work something out. Anything. Name it." Liu Chen looked at him for a long moment with the expression of someone listening to something that is technically language but is not quite communication. "Let me tell you what you did," he said. His voice was still even. Still patient. Like a man who has rehearsed this not out of anger but out of precision, because he wanted to get it right. "You used your family's name and your connections to access arrangements you didn't earn. You leveraged partnerships built on false representations. You hid liabilities. Across 3 holding companies in ways that are not legal." A pause. "I know this because I've known it for 2 years. Because I paid attention to you long before you ever noticed I existed." Jiahao's face had gone gray. "I didn't ruin you because of a personal grievance," Liu Chen continued. "I ended your operation because it was corrupt, and it was affecting people it had no right to affect." His eyes moved briefly, to Zhao Liyan. Everything else was incidental. Zhao Liyan flinched. She didn't mean to. It escaped her. Liu Chen, she said. And her voice was different now. The cold precision from the ballroom 2 days ago was completely gone, replaced by something raw and unsteady that sounded like the beginning of falling apart. Liu Chen, I didn't know. I didn't know who you were. I didn't, if I had. If you had known, he said quietly, you would have treated me differently. She opened her mouth. That's the thing, he said. That's actually the point. He wasn't cruel about it. He wasn't even particularly sad about it. He just said it the way you say a true thing, plainly, because there's no other way to say it. You didn't choose wrong, Zhao Liyan. You chose exactly what you wanted. You chose what was visible, what was obvious, what was safe. A beat. You chose what you deserved. The silence in the room was total. Zhao Liyan's hands were trembling. She pressed them together in her lap, below the edge of the table, where she hoped no one could see. Something was moving through her that she did not have a word for, not quite regret, not quite grief, but something adjacent to both of them, something that felt like a door closing on a room you didn't know you wanted until it was locked. I'm sorry, she said. I know it's too late, and I know it doesn't fix anything. But I'm sorry. He looked at her. His expression didn't change. I know you are, he said. That doesn't change anything either. He turned back to Jiahao. Your last remaining financial lifeline, he said, the Northgate asset package, is being liquidated as of this morning. Whatever you have left personally is yours. I'm not interested in complete destruction. He glanced at the older man. Your father built something once. Clean. That work deserves to survive even if this doesn't. A pause. Take what you can carry and start over somewhere smaller. That's the offer. Jiahao looked at him with the expression of a man who cannot quite believe the leniency and cannot quite feel relieved by it. That's it, he said. You're letting us go. I'm not letting you do anything, Liu Chen said. I'm telling you what's left. He stood up. The meeting was over. Outside, the afternoon had turned gold, the way afternoons sometimes do when you've stopped paying attention and the light has shifted without asking permission. Liu Chen stepped out of the building into the full warmth of it and stopped on the steps for a moment, just a moment, and let himself breathe. The convoy was waiting. Of course it was. But what he hadn't expected, what he hadn't known to expect, because some things cannot be planned for, was Mei Xinyue, standing 10 feet from the lead car, a paper coffee cup in each hand, looking at him with the same expression she always wore, quiet, steady, without demand. He stopped walking. How did you know to come here? He asked. She looked at him for a moment. I didn't, she said. I knew to come to you. The rest was just coordinates. He looked at her. He looked at the coffee cups. He thought about a third-floor corridor in Donghua Plaza and a woman who had handed him a drink and said, not everyone sees your worth, but that doesn't mean it isn't there. He thought about how many times in his life someone had said something to him, really said something to him, and meant it without needing anything back. You knew, he said. It was not entirely a question. You knew who I was. She was quiet for a moment. I knew who you were, she said. I didn't know the rest. A small pause. It didn't matter to me either way. May. You don't have to explain it, she said. You don't have to explain any of it. She held out one of the cups. Double shot. You look like you need it. He almost laughed. He didn't, quite, but something moved across his face that was close enough to it that she smiled. He took the cup. You stayed, he said. When I had nothing, when I was choosing to have nothing, you stayed. I saw everything you were, she said simply. He looked at her for a long moment with the kind of look that a person gives something they didn't know they were missing until they stopped running long enough to notice it was there. He thought about worth, what it meant to have it, what it meant to know it, what it meant when someone else saw it without being told to look. Come with me, he said. She tilted her head. Where? Somewhere quieter, he said. Somewhere that doesn't have any of this in it for a while. She considered him. She considered the convoy. She considered the gold light and the cooling coffee and the very strange, very specific feeling of standing next to a person and knowing, without needing more information, that this is where you are supposed to be. Okay, she said. They walked to the car together. The door opened. They got in. The convoy moved smoothly into the city traffic and disappeared the way it always disappeared, not dramatically, not with announcement, but simply and completely, as if it had never been there at all. If this story moved you, if you felt every blow and every silence and every moment of quiet triumph, subscribe now and share it with someone who needs to hear it. New stories drop every week. Later, days later, in a different city, in a different kind of quiet, Liu Chen stood at a window and looked at a horizon that held no particular significance and thought about all the things that had brought him to this exact point. The years of deliberate invisibility. The slaps he had absorbed. The names he had been called, burden, failure, unworthy, and had filed away not for the purpose of revenge but for the purpose of remembering that the people who said them had never once been curious enough to ask what lay underneath. Power didn't change fate. He had known that for a long time. Fate was what it was, the family that disowned you, the woman who chose what she could see over what she couldn't, the laughter of a room full of people who mistook a uniform for a ceiling. Fate happened to you whether you were powerful or not. But power, real power, the kind that is built in silence and hidden in plain sight, power revealed something. It pulled the curtain back. It showed you, clearly and without ambiguity, exactly which people had been worth your love and which ones had only ever been worth your time. He thought about Zhao Liyun's face in the boardroom. He thought about Jiahao's gray expression. He thought about the specific quality of apology that comes from someone who is sorry not about the wound they caused but about the consequence it brought back to them. He felt nothing particularly sharp about any of it. Not vindication, not satisfaction, not even peace, just a kind of settled clarity, the feeling of a long equation finally resolving into a clean number. Behind him, Mei Xingyue was reading something, her legs folded beneath her on the couch, a cup of tea cooling on the table beside her. She had not asked him to explain himself. She had not needed the full story before deciding she was in. She had simply stayed. The way she had always stayed. Simply and completely, without condition, without calculation. He turned away from the window. "You're thinking very loudly," she said, without looking up. "Sorry," he said. "Don't be." She turned a page. "Just come sit down." He did. Power doesn't change fate. It reveals who was never meant to stay. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, and very patient, and very willing to be invisible for exactly as long as it takes, it also reveals the one who was always meant to.